Jim, thank you so much for joining us today.
It's good to be back on. It's been a couple months, and as usual, events are in high speed. I don't know if we're going to cover much about the Turkish situation, but I believe that's the biggest event of close to the decade, because this is not played out yet. I think we're going to see NATO disbanded. But let's get to the questions, because there are a lot of them.
Right, and I did ask viewers to submit questions, and I remember one of them actually was about Turkey, so we'll get to that a little bit later. But first I was going to ask you about Switzerland. It was recently reported that Switzerland exported a record amount of gold to the U.S. in May. Now, we haven't seen this amount of gold being exported from Switzerland to the U.S. in decades. In fact, it was more than 50 times the monthly average. So I guess, what are your initial thoughts on this?
A risk of a Comex default. Plain and simple. I've been trying to verify if there's actually a second, maybe bigger motive for this, but here's the evidence. Let me first cover what the other bigger motive might be. There has been some talk. I even had among my colleagues a little talk about the possibility that Switzerland, through Basel, the Bank for International Settlements, is trying to make a provision for a gold-backed dollar. And I say, I don't know, that's way too ambitious a plan to carry out this quickly. Not going to happen. So here's the evidence that backs up the point that it's probably to hold up the Comex, not rob, but support the Comex. In the most recent months to come, they are standing for delivery of approximately 21 tons of gold. And the amount of gold that was in the most recent month sent to the United States from Switzerland was 20.7. So 21 versus 20.7, that's pretty clear in the match. So I'm concluding that we are very near default territory for the Comex with respect to gold. It's never quite that simple, but that is how it looks right now. And that's exciting.
Definitely. And I was reading one of your recent articles, and you were saying something about gold in Switzerland. You said that, quote, we will see the remedy towards owners of over 40,000 tons of rehypothecated and stolen gold in bullion banks across the world, primarily in Switzerland. So, I was reading this, and I had just read about Switzerland, a little bit before, and I was like, wait a second, is there a connection here? I guess, did you want to talk a little bit about this? Is there a connection there between Switzerland exporting all this gold and your comment in the article?
I really don't think so. I believe my article might have been a kind of a lofty, idealistic thought that 20, 30 years of gold fraud and rehypothecation would demand a remedy. I don't think this is part of it. I think that the Swiss bankers will be murdered before they pay back 40,000 tons that are stolen. Things like that don't get remedied, Elijah. They get compromised. I mean, people are murdered. Other people are murdered. Big deals are struck. Other deals are made in order to rescue an elite in a bad, awkward, vulnerable position. Before you know it, they don't remedy anything. They just continue the current system. I don't think the current system is going to be continued. It cannot be continued. But the movement of gold from Switzerland does not appear to be any kind of remedy of past rehypothecation. It looks to me like just making sure, very simply, that the Comex does not go into default in August and September.
All right. Now, I'd like to move, still on the topic of the gold market, I'd like to move to a clarification of Sharia law. I was just reading this, that a clarification of Sharia law could actually mean that 1.6 billion Muslims in the world would actually be able to purchase gold. Now, in the past, it was thought that they could not do this, but it seems like there might be a clarification coming and that these Muslims will actually be able to purchase gold. I guess, what are your thoughts on the significance of this, and what impact, if any, will it have on the gold market?
I think it'll be kind of a minor impact. To begin with, most of the Muslim countries are close to bankrupt. I don't think that we have any big Muslim countries that have shining, thriving industries. I don't think there are much of any Muslim nations that have a colossal number of patents and intellectual property. I don't think there's even car production in a single Muslim country. You catch my drift? They're not wealth centers. They don't produce wealth. They've got oil. And outside of oil and gas, and maybe some mining, I don't think these Muslim countries have squat for wealth. So if the Sharia law permits them to buy gold, well, that's fantastic. I think it'll be a very, very small fraction of what Hong Kong buys. So don't really care. Not an important factor in my book.
Right. It seems like, for example, China has been buying a lot more gold. A little while back, we saw that the Shanghai Gold Exchange was actually trading physical gold, and now the Tokyo Commodity Exchange is doing exactly the same thing. So how do you think this will impact the ability of, we've talked about gold and silver price manipulation and Western central banks manipulating the price of gold and silver by throwing these paper contracts on the market, just basically naked shorting precious metals. But if Shanghai and now Tokyo are trading physical gold, do you think that'll maybe make it harder for the powers that be to manipulate the price of gold through paper gold contracts?
Absolutely. This is very big news because there are a lot of important events taking place in Japan right now. And I'd like to end with the political side, but the important financial events are their government bond. It's called the JGB, Japanese government bond. It's in trouble. It's offering a negative rate. It's the biggest negative rate out there, and it's in trouble. I don't want to get into all the details of how it's in trouble, and to be honest, I don't understand all the elements of how it's in trouble, but it seems to be supported in a bigger way by the Bank of Japan than ever before, and it looks like investors from financial institutions are getting out when the central bank, Bank of Japan, is getting more in. So they've already for just about 2 years been on an official infinite volume quantitative easing. They actually use the words infinite QE. That's utterly astonishing. So they're wrecking their financial system at a time when gold is starting to move and the dollar is starting to show signs of its not imminent demise, but eventual demise. So here are the Japanese who are reeling still from Fukushima, which I believe the Bush crime family committed, as vengeance for Japan announcing their cooperation with China on a regional gold-backed currency in East Asia. U.S. didn't like that, so the Rockefeller clan, call them what you want, they're a crime family. The Rockefeller clan hired the Bush hit squad to do a back-to-back tsunami done by the HARP weapon, weather control system, both hurricanes when pointed upward and earthquakes when pointed downward, back-to-back with a HARP tsunami and a series of explosions on phony oil offshore rigs. And all the people were murdered who were involved in the construction. Okay, that was Fukushima. So they're still reeling from that. And as a result, I think that some of the real strong undercurrent of resistance within Japan is turning away from the United States. Even though Japan is very well understood to be a vassal state, or call it a slave state, that's a better name for it, because we threaten to kill their bankers anytime they don't do what we say. Just to give you a quick background on how important Japan was, in 1991, Wall Street ordered them to go to the 0%. They ordered them to do the quantitative easing. That way, the Wall Street people could borrow unlimited amounts of Japanese money at 0% and invest in U.S. stocks and bonds. It's called the yen carry trade. Rubin continued that vein in the 1990 decade later with the gold carry trade, put a 0% lease rate on gold. So they borrowed Fort Knox gold and invested in U.S. treasuries, and that gave us the, quote, decade of prosperity under Clinton. I call it the decade of stolen prosperity because it wasted our gold reserves. Okay, Japan is in a transition right now. There was a recent event where the U.S. military is having to abandon one of the islands on a pretty important military base. I'm not sure. It could be Okinawa. I don't think it's Okinawa. There are a few. So there's a movement away, and it looks like Abe, Prime Minister Abe, is going to get swept out. He's nothing more than a Washington puppet and a moron. He's going to get swept out. So big things are happening in Japan, and I think it's all pointing toward more movement away from treasuries, away from Japanese government bonds, and toward gold. And I'm looking for them to create an alliance with China very substantially for a formidable pair in Asia. All they need left is South Korea to join in the gold parade. So very important point. And if I were to put numbers on it, comparing it to the Sharia effect, this is 1,000 times more important and powerful.
You know, mentioning about that Japan is going to, keep importing more and more gold. People have also talked about how China is importing a lot of gold and that they might actually have a lot more gold than they say they have. Now, moving to viewers' questions, Derek Ferdig is wanting to know about how much gold do you think China has. He's wondering just that, and that he's wondering, how the renminbi, the yuan, is going to be included in the SDR basket in October. He's wondering if before then you see that China will actually be honest and say how much gold they actually do have. So two questions there. How much gold do you think China has, and will China actually say how much gold they have?
It's a tough question when you want to know how much gold does China have. You can't really answer that question in a simple way. To begin with, what are you referring to when you say China? You saying the Chinese government? Are you saying their entire sovereign wealth funds? Are you saying their elders, their families? Are you saying just their central bank? Are you saying industrial treasuries? Okay, if you were to add it all up and include the private families, the ancient, wealthy private families that often go by the name of the White Dragons, whether it's a White Dragon Society, family, the Red Dragons. I mean, there are a number of elder families there. In the United States, we look at wealthy figures like, the Wall Street bankers and Ford and Gates and Rockefeller and a number of other families, Carnegie even, from my old Carnegie Mellon. When we talk about the United States gold wealth, do we include the Rockefeller wealth? Do we include the Bush crime family wealth? Do we include the criminal Clinton Foundation wealth? Do we include any private wealth that the Ford family might have? Of course not. So when you talk about the Chinese wealth and their gold, I believe their White Dragons have over 100,000 tons of gold. Okay? I've heard 110, I've heard 140 from reliable sources. There have been a lot of calculations about hidden official, which means government and sovereign wealth fund, gold. Now, when you talk about the Chinese government and their official reserves, it's usually their central bank. But you must include the SAFE. SAFE is the State Administration for Foreign Exchange. You also need to include the CIC, which is the Chinese Investment Corp. You also need to include things like the industrial stockpile from large consortiums of companies, most of which are state-owned. They're developing a silver stockpile. And I believe if that's the case, they're going to develop a gold stockpile. So I don't know how much gold China has. All I do know is they got a shitload, okay? They got way more than what they admit. And I think just on the official side, which is the central bank and the sovereign wealth funds and maybe some corporate consortia for stockpiles, I think they got at least 30,000 tons. And the Voice confirms that, and is actually the person who led me into that style of thinking. Okay, now back to the RMB and its launch. Will they admit to the amount of gold? I think that if they do a gold backing of the RMB currency, which just means renminbi, and that's, I mean, officially their currency is called the yuan. That's Y-U-A-N, yuan. Yuan. I've had some Chinese clients correct me. It's not yuan, it's yuan. It's yuan or yuan. Anyway, I like calling it the RMB, which is Chinese for people's money, renminbi, people's money. Okay, the RMB, if they do a launch of a gold-backed RMB, they will admit to having a gargantuan amount of gold. And when they do that, it'll be like a new kid on the block is big, is strong, is healthy, and intimidates the weaklings like Uncle Sam, who's withered and has no gold. When this strong RMB comes on the scene, it's going to take the world by storm. It's going to cause an avalanche of dumping of treasury bonds in favor of either gold or the gold-backed currencies like RMB. When the RMB gold launch, gold-backed RMB is launched, I expect it will not be long before a gold-backed ruble is launched. This begs the other question. If China, I believe, has 30,000 tons of gold at its official disposal, how much does Russia have? The Voice told me 5 years ago that in the 1990s he was doing consulting work in the post-Yeltsin cleanup, where they were getting rid of all the oligarchs who were in favor of the big seven sister Western oil companies. It was the move by Brzezinski and that whole clan for trying to control Russia by means of the oil companies in the West. Putin stopped all that, and during that whole decade, the Voice did an extensive amount of consulting work there, and he said, Jim, my Russian is not very good. I was able to just get by. I'm English and German. Okay, well, that's fine. He's from Central Europe. But he told me, I have personally seen there are 20 to 25,000 tons of gold in the Kremlin vaults. Okay, so if the RMB comes out with a launched gold-backed currency, I think we're going to see a ruble currency gold-backed also. And that'll start a parade. And the parade will include a lot of different currencies, like perhaps a gold-backed German Deutschmark. That's a little redundant. A gold-backed Deutschmark. It could include a gold-backed Swiss franc. Could involve a silver-backed Mexican peso. Could involve a number of different currencies, possibly even a Central American gold and copper-backed dollar from Panama for Latin American use. Okay, so very important point, great question. China and Russia each have at least 25,000, maybe 30,000 tons of gold, each. The United States might have some gold, but it's in elite criminal hands and stolen property. So I don't know how that's going to resolve itself. I'm looking forward to the beginning of the parade. We'll see.
Now, while we're on the topic of gold standard, I was going to jump ahead here to this viewer's question. He's wondering about why you think some parts of the world will go on to a gold standard in the future. He says, it seems like people are brainwashed right now. Why do you believe that people will go back to a gold standard instead of simply, falling for another fiat currency?
Because when the system breaks with a fiat currency foundation, it cannot be fixed with a different fiat currency. It's like saying, I got rotten wood, but I got some better rotten wood to replace it and make your back porch. No, you got rotten wood, and the wood has been discredited. The paper money system has been discredited. We're not going to go to a different paperback system to fix the paperback broken system. I call that the second corollary of the Austrian School of Economics. They believe in sound money, that without sound money, all the economic structures begin to fall and all the financial structures just collapse. We're now having the effects of debt saturation and phony money that's being complicated by the Fed's quantitative easing, which I call African-style hypermonetary inflation. You cannot have the Fed with its QE and monetary inflation destroying the system and then saying, well, there's a different paper that's also being created in some unlimited fashion, and it's going to replace this dollar that's being created in unlimited. No, they're all ruined. All the paper system is ruined for not just currencies, but we'll find out soon, for bonds and for stocks. And that's why I tell people to get out of the stock and bond market, start buying as much gold and silver as you can, because the paper wealth system is collapsing. You cannot replace a broken paper monetary system, fiat paper, based on confidence and trust. You destroy the confidence and trust, you cannot instill the same type of confidence and trust in a different kind of paper system. Therefore, you're not going to see any solution with the IMF using their super sovereign currency bond, for instance, with the dollar, euro, pound, and yen backing some kind of a bond or formulating some kind of a bond that goes into the global banking system. No, that's a paper substitute for a paper broken system. We might possibly see an initiative where the IMF says we have gold backing of this super sovereign bond. That's a different story. That's an option I hope we don't see, but I think it might be attempted.
Now, you mentioned how people should purchase gold and silver to protect from, the devaluation of currency. Now, this viewer is wanting to know about, what about people who can't afford a lot of ounces of gold or silver? He says that, he's heard a lot of people say, there's just no sense in buying silver because I can't afford 10,000 ounces, so it's just a waste of time. Now, I guess, what is your perspective on this? What is the minimum amount of silver that people should buy? And he says, would maybe buying just 1 ounce at a time be better than nothing?
My answer is kind of simple, Elijah. Buy whatever you have in savings and you don't need for your monthly expenses. I'm assuming that there's some income there, monthly income. If you got savings, I would put 80 to 90% of it in gold and silver. I don't care how much. I don't care how much. What do you want to preserve? Why would anyone say, well, I want to preserve my savings, but I'd rather not preserve this $2,000. Why not? Is it your savings or is it not? Preserve the bulk of your savings, period. If that's $1.5 million, fine. Save it. Don't lose it. If you got $8,000, do you want to piss it away or do you want to save it? Preserve it. Don't piss it away. Whatever you don't buy in gold and silver, I think is going to be at monumental risk when you see the launch of the new Scheisse dollar, followed by devaluations. Then you regret not putting all of your savings in gold and silver, because gold and silver in the new dollar, it's going to go up double and triple, bang, bang, just like that. So why would you not want to put all of your disposable savings, or the great majority, in gold and silver. It's that simple.
Right. I mean, I've said before, it seems like the people who say, well, how much gold and silver should I buy? In my opinion, it's more of how many, fiat paper dollars do you want to have left when the currency gets devalued? But obviously, that's just my opinion on this. And this next viewer wants to know about precious metal mining shares. He asks about whether he should take physical possession of his precious metal mining shares. Now, I guess this kind of is assuming that investing in precious metal mining shares is a good idea. So I guess that's kind of two separate questions. What are your thoughts on precious metal mining shares? And if you think that's something that people should be investing in, do you think people should take physical possession of the paper precious metal mining shares?
To begin with, I don't like mining stocks. I have not since 2008. So don't worry about them. Just leave them alone. Do you think there's maybe a little bit of accounting fraud in the mining companies? Better question. Do you think there's a great amount of inflation of mining shares? By that I mean, well, they have another project. The price of gold is low. Price of silver is low. They're not making much money on the other operations, so they need to raise money. So they're going to increase the float by 15 or 30% on their stock. Good luck in future prospects of making money on that investment. No, the inflation and the accounting fraud for mining companies is astonishing. It's horrendous. Okay, so where's the payday going to be for mining shares? I don't know. And if and when the gold price goes up, say, to $2,000, if it goes up to $2,000 by January, when is the profit going to come for the mining companies? Will they not have extra costs to bring their operations from mothballed mines into output mode? People are not thinking in these terms. People are kind of shallow. They think, wow, the price of gold, they're going to be making money right away. No, they're not. They're going to have a $1 billion charge for reopening a mine that they sealed. They're going to have a $200 million charge for opening a mine that maybe, like Kennecott, sabotaged. I think that was probably a sabotage. I mean, golly, the whole thing is now under 1 million tons of dirt. Okay, well, is that not an example of deep storage gold? Golly. Now, I don't like mining shares. There's still too many questions, and when the time comes and you see a big lift up in the gold price, you might find that your three little companies that have wonderful new prospects just got bought out by Newmont and three other big mining companies, so you're the proud holder of some crappy big mining company shares. You don't have those problems when you're sitting on a ton of silver or on 10,000 ounces of gold. What's the price of gold? It goes up. Then you've got some profit. I don't like the complication of these shares. I got duped into them and I lost some money between 2002, 2008, and I got sick and tired of additional secondary stock issuance. I got sick and tired of several stories of accounting fraud, and now I believe that any company doing mining operations in Mexico is lying about how much the Zetas are stealing their output. I got no time for any mining shares. I hope that answers the question.
Hey everyone, thanks for watching.